Jason stared in disbelief as the waitress slid the bill across the table, 3D50 for each glass of tap water. The room's friendly hum turned icy with tension, veterans' pride challenged by a petty injustice. Then, with quiet resolve, something unexpected began to unfold. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Jason sat back in his chair, the weight of the injustice settling like a stone in his gut. The flickering candlelight did little to soften the harsh glare of the restaurant's upscale decor. Around him, the polished tables and muted conversations felt suddenly alien, as if the entire place was conspiring against the very people it should honor. He glanced at Mike, whose jaw was clenched tight, eyes narrowing with a quiet fury. Sam, usually the calmest of the group, was visibly agitated, fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the table. Derek's usual easy smile was gone, replaced by a hard, bitter edge. These weren't men used to being disrespected, not in a place where their sacrifices should have been valued. Jason's mind raced back over the countless missions, the long stretches in unforgiving environments, the dangers faced without hesitation. Every operation had been about trust, respect, and honor, values that now felt undermined by a simple, petty charge. The $3.50 sales fee for tap water wasn't just a price tag, it was a symbol of something deeper, a failure to recognize the true cost borne by those who served. His hands clenched into fists on the table, knuckles whitening. He wanted to say something sharp, to confront the manager and demand acknowledgement, but the group's collective restraint held him back. They had come here to celebrate, not to create a scene, yet the sting of this insult festered. Emily, the waitress, returned briefly to check on them, her smile polite but strained, clearly caught in the uncomfortable middle between management and patrons. Jason noticed a flicker of sympathy in her eyes, as if she knew the absurdity of the policy but was powerless to change it. That small human connection contrasted painfully with Greg's icy demeanor. The manager's words had been clipped, void of warmth or apology, as if veterans' service was just another box to tick, a line item in a ledger rather than a life lived on the edge for others' safety. Jason's mind peeled back layers of the situation. He knew well the economics of running a business. He had dealt with tough regulations and budget cuts in the military. But charging for tap water, it felt like crossing a line, a subtle, corporate greed disguised as policy, the kind of petty bureaucratic callousness that erodes public trust. It wasn't just about money, it was about dignity. Veterans had fought for freedom and fairness, yet here they were, nickeled and dimed for something so trivial, treated like inconveniences rather than honored guests. As the silence stretched, Jason thought about the other patrons. Some glanced their way, a few whispering behind hands. The room held an unspoken tension, the atmosphere shifting from relaxed celebration to quiet conflict. Jason realized this wasn't merely a personal affront, it was emblematic of a broader disconnect between those who serve and those who profit from society's surface hospitality. This tap water charge, seemingly trivial, became a metaphor for how easily respect can be eroded by small but pointed acts of disregard. The veterans exchanged looks, a silent understanding passing between them. Mike's voice, low but steady, broke the stillness. "We earned better than this." It wasn't a question, but a statement loaded with years of sacrifice and hard-won pride. Jason nodded, feeling the surge of shared resolve. They weren't just customers. They were representatives of countless stories of courage and loss, stories too often overlooked. The injustice felt acute, not because of the money, but because it revealed a cold truth about how some places value profit over people. This wasn't just about tap water or a restaurant policy. It was about recognition, respect, and the cost of indifference. Jason's gaze locked with Greg's for a moment, unflinching, silently demanding more than a rule. It demanded humanity. Jason's voice barely rose above the murmur of the room, but his words carried the weight of unspoken defiance. "Let's make a statement." There was no bravado, no clamor, just a quiet resolve settling over the group. From beneath their coats and pockets, they produced jars thick with pennies, the faded copper coins clinking softly as they moved. Each jar was a testament to years of collecting, small tokens saved in countless places, a mosaic of persistence. These weren't just coins, they were symbols of endurance, grit, and the bitter history of veterans who had learned to fight battles beyond the battlefield. The notion of paying a bill in pennies wasn't new, but in this moment, it crystallized into a deliberate act of silent rebellion. Jason's hand moved methodically, laying the first handful of coins on the polished table. The pennies spilled with a muted clatter, each one a small rebellion against the indignity they'd endured. Eyes in the restaurant flicked toward the table. The subtle shift in atmosphere was immediate. Emily's polite smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of concern, while Greg, the manager, leaned forward, his jaw tightening as the pile grew. What began as a few coins became a deliberate cascade, copper spreading across the mahogany surface until the sum matched the exorbitant charge. The gesture was unambiguous. This was no mere payment. It was a statement forged from frustration, a quiet roar against a system that commodified even the most basic acts of hospitality. The staff exchanged uneasy glances. Whispers wove through the dining room like a rising tide, rippling through the patrons who had been moments before engaged in their own conversations. Some watched with curiosity, others with barely concealed discomfort. Jason met Greg's glare, unyielding and steady, a silent conversation passing between them, one of principle versus profit, respect versus rules. The manager's face flushed, color spreading rapidly from his neck to his ears, betraying the composure he had so deliberately maintained. His voice, when it came, was sharp but wavering. "This payment is unacceptable. We cannot accept pennies as legal tender for the bill." Mike's eyes held a quiet fire as he responded without raising his voice. "It's legal tender. You can count it." His tone was calm, deliberate, carrying the weight of someone accustomed to standing firm under pressure. The veterans made no move to relent. There was no anger in their stance, only a steadfast dignity that refused to be diminished by petty policies or managerial arrogance. They weren't here to provoke. They sought only to highlight an injustice. The pennies were more than currency. They were a mirror held up to the restaurant's indifference. A tense silence stretched, thick and palpable, before Jason's voice broke through once more, soft but resolute. "We're done here." Mike rose smoothly to his feet, signaling the conclusion of their protest. The others followed, gathering coats with practiced ease, their movements deliberate but without haste. They left behind the copper mosaic on the table, a quiet monument to persistence, and the echo of their footsteps fading into the evening air. In their wake, the restaurant was left suspended in stunned silence. Conversations halted, forks hovered midair, and eyes lingered on the empty seats where the veterans had been. The murmurs swelled into a low buzz of whispered speculation and uneasy glances. Some patrons looked on with newfound respect, others with unease. The staff exchanged glances, caught between empathy and frustration, while Greg's face remained a portrait of simmering embarrassment. This was not a dramatic confrontation. It was something far more powerful, a silent rebellion, a refusal to accept disrespect cloaked in corporate policy. It was a message delivered without words, but one that resonated deeply, an assertion that dignity cannot be bought or sold, not even in pennies. The veterans walked away carrying more than coats. They carried their honor intact, leaving behind a challenge that would linger long after their departure. The ripple effect was immediate and relentless. Within hours, images of jars brimming with pennies, arranged meticulously atop the Seagull Bistro's polished tables, began flooding social media platforms. The accompanying note, succinct yet piercing, detailed the ordeal. Veterans charged exorbitantly for tap water, a basic courtesy transformed into a profit-driven slight. The narrative struck a nerve far beyond the confines of the restaurant's walls. Comments poured in, voices unified in indignation not solely over the price of water, but the blatant disrespect it symbolized toward those who had served. The story evolved quickly from a local grievance into a broader discourse on dignity, gratitude, and the often overlooked cost of honor. News crews descended, eager to unpack the layers beneath the headline. Interviews with Jason and his companions were tempered, their tone measured yet resolute. They expressed no desire for revenge or spectacle, only a plea for fairness and recognition. Their calm strength contrasted sharply with the harshness of the restaurant's policy, underscoring the quiet courage that had defined their actions that evening. The veterans' silent protest had morphed into a powerful statement on respect, capturing the attention of a community grappling with how to properly honor those who bore burdens few could comprehend. Pressure mounted swiftly on the restaurant's ownership. Statements released bore the unmistakable tone of contrition, acknowledging a failure to honor the unwritten contract between society and its defenders. The owner's formal apology was more than mere words. It was a commitment, public and binding, to refund the veterans for the unjust charges and to abolish the contentious policy altogether. Behind the scenes, decisions followed with equal gravity. Greg, the manager whose cold dismissal had ignited the conflict, was reassigned to a different location, a tacit acknowledgement of the damage wrought under his stewardship. Staff at every level underwent comprehensive sensitivity training designed not only to rectify misunderstandings, but to instill a culture of genuine respect for veterans and their sacrifices. The aftermath resonated far beyond the transactional refund. The story crystallized into a symbol, a beacon illuminating the subtle yet pervasive injustices that veterans often face in civilian life, small indignities that accumulate into broader alienation. Jason's quiet rebellion had sparked more than just a policy reversal. It had ignited a community-wide conversation about honor, respect, and the obligation owed to those who have served. Conversations in homes, workplaces, and social media feeds shifted, reflecting a renewed awareness and commitment to appreciating the often invisible toll borne by military service. That night, as the public clamor settled into a sustained dialogue, Jason gathered with his friends. There was no boastfulness, no triumphalism, only a sober recognition of what had been achieved. The incident, while sparked by a trivial charge, had evolved into a profound lesson on the power of dignity and the importance of standing firm in the face of injustice. Sometimes the smallest pennies make the biggest difference, Jason mused quietly, a phrase that captured the essence of their protest and its unexpected impact. In those words lay a profound truth. Change often begins in the smallest acts of courage, in moments when ordinary people choose to stand for principle rather than convenience. Jason and his team hadn't merely contested a bill, they had restored a measure of respect, and in doing so, reminded a community of its debts, not just financial, but moral and human. The veteran's story became a lasting testament to the potency of integrity, the necessity of acknowledgement, and the enduring power of quiet rebellion to catalyze justice.